What's up, fight fans? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about one of the most unique groups of fighters we've seen in the UFC, the Fighting Nerds. This crew of Brazilian fighters has built a massive fan base with their flashy skills, wild fight styles, and impressive performances inside the octagon. But here's the thing, 2025 hasn't exactly been their year. For the first time since entering the UFC, the Fighting Nerds have been facing elite level competition, and almost all of them have tasted defeat. The only one still holding on to an undefeated UFC streak is none other than Silva, and with his upcoming fight against Diego Lopes, he might be carrying the entire Fighting Nerd legacy on his back, but we're gonna talk about that later. Let's break down each Fighting Nerd and how they lost in 2025 and what's at stake when Silva steps into the octagon to face Diego Lopes at UFC Noche. But before we unpack all that, if you like this video at the end, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let's get into it. The Fighting Nerds aren't just a group of training partners, they're a brotherhood. Known for their anime-inspired personalities, flashy fight styles, and relentless drive, they've captured the attention of hardcore fans and casuals alike. The squad includes Carlos Prates, a dangerous striker with knockout power, Mauricio Ruffy, a slick and creative fighter with highlight reel moments, Caio Borralho, a well-rounded middleweight with strong grappling and striking, and Silva, the featherweight phenom who's still undefeated in the UFC. Some call them overhyped, others see them as the future Brazilian MMA. But no matter what side you're on, you can't deny they've each made noise since signing with the UFC. When Carlos Prates entered the UFC, he looked like an unstoppable force, a southpaw striker with insane pressure, big power in both hands, and willingness to take risks. His early UFC run was nothing short of spectacular, racking up wins and building hype around his name. But in 2025, reality hit. Prates finally ran into more polished technical striker who could deal with his pressure and also instilled the grappling game. He's matched against, of course, Ian Garry. In that fight, we saw Prates' weakness exposed, his tendency to get hit, his lack of defense head movement, and the fact that he sometimes relies too much on his knockout shots, and of course his deficiency in the grappling. It was a tough loss, but one that showed he still got a lot of potential. The hype may have slowed down, but don't sleep on Prates because he did actually come back and have an amazing knockout against Ruffy, and he's definitely back on the winning streak and still someone who is a force to be dealt with at welterweight. Up next, we got Mauricio Ruffy. Ruffy has always been one of the most entertaining fighting nerds. He's fast, creative, and isn't afraid to mix things up with his flashy kicks, wild scrambles, and highlight reel moments. But 2025 gave him his first real adversity. Coming off an amazing highlight reel knockout against Bobby Green, he faced Benoît Denis, who pretty much was more disciplined in his tactics and his game plan and took him to deep waters. Now, he was able to slow the pace down, take away Ruffy's creativity. The problem for Ruffy was his defense for sure, his grappling defense and his striking as well. He left too many openings, and once the fight was dragged into deep waters, he couldn't keep up the same explosive style that usually overwhelms opponents. That loss showed fans that while Ruffy has all the tools, he still needs to polish up the fundamentals if he wants to climb the rankings, especially for the division he's in. It's the lightweight division. I mean, if he can't get past someone like BSD, who, I'm gonna be honest, has been counted out due to his losing streak lately, although he's back in the winning column, and his win against Ruffy just showed that he was a much improved fighter. But like I said, I think Mauricio Ruffy definitely has to do a work in polishing up his fundamentals, and if he does that, he will be able to climb the rankings. Now let's talk about Caio Borralho. Caio was supposed to be the technical genius of the Fighting Nerds, a well-rounded middleweight with strong striking, a tricky southpaw stance, and a solid grappling to back it up. His early UFC run took the title to the start of the real title contender, but 2025 also gave him a big setback against no other than Nassourdine Imavov. Now, according to Caio Borralho himself, he did admit that Nassourdine Imavov was just the better fighter that night, and it's hard to deny that.
I think just Nassourdine was a better man today. He was very fast as I was expecting, so he did very good into the fight. I couldn't adapt that much. I wanted to make this fight entertaining for the fans and for the UFC. So I tried to strike with one of the best strikers in the world, and that's why you guys saw a great war. And I just think that I need to find my adrenaline back.
He also did admit that he wasn't that ready for the fight in terms of being gingered, in terms of being excited. If you take into account the fact that he did cut weight 2 months back to back in order to be the backup of Hamzat versus DDP. I think that was the fight he was the backup for. That definitely affected him, but no excuses. He lost to Nassourdine Imavov fair and square, and it was a technical fight. His striking wasn't enough to keep up his opponents, to be honest, and his takedowns didn't come as easily as before. In fact, I was kind of disappointed in the lack of takedowns that he attempted. Borralho's loss was especially tough because it came at a time when fans were starting to talk about him as a serious contender in the division. Now the question is whether Caio can regroup and rebuild that momentum, because at middleweight, one loss can really stall your rise up in the rankings. Now we get to the main person in this video, Jean Silva, the last undefeated member of the Fighting Nerds. Silva has looked like a future star ever since stepping into the UFC. He's aggressive, explosive, and dangerous everywhere, whether it's striking, exchanges, scrambles, or submissions. And I'm not gonna lie, his last fight against Bryce Mitchell surprised me, because if you could say, hey, between Jean Silva and Bryce Mitchell, who do you think will win by a submission? I would have picked Bryce Mitchell because he is the grappler, but Silva impressed me on the ground, and he actually won by a submission, and his stock has been rising up constantly. He's already picked up some big wins and has people talking, and unlike his teammates, he hasn't flattered yet. But now Silva faces the biggest challenge of his career, Diego Lopes, and with the way their skill sets match, that's definitely going to be a tough test. And with all the pressure on Jean Silva of the Fighting Nerds not having a loss this year, I think that's also going to add to everything. Now let's break down this matchup, because it's one of the most exciting fights of 2025. Diego Lopes has been on a meteoric rise. He's come into the UFC as an underdog but quickly became a fan favorite thanks to his insane grappling skills, relentless pace, and willingness to take risks. Lopes has faced high-level competition and proved he belongs with the best. His jiu-jitsu is world class, but what makes him special is how aggressive he is with it. He doesn't just look to control, he hunts for submissions. On the feet, he's not the most polished striker, to be honest, but he's very tough, durable, and willing to trade until he gets the fight where he wants it. On the other side, we have Jean Silva, who brings the explosive striking and serious finishing ability. He's got the speed advantage, the power advantage, and he's dangerous in every exchange. Now, what's the key to this fight? That's the main questions. Whether Silva can keep it standing. If he can use his movement, his takedown defense, and punish Lopes with clean strikes on the feet, he could hand Diego one of his toughest nights in the UFC. And that's a hard one to match, because Diego Lopes fight against Volkanovski was it was a one-way streak, but we're talking about Volkanovski, who's one of the greatest fighters at featherweight, one of the greatest fighters ever. So that's not a bad loss if you're being fair. But if Lopes gets inside, drags this into a grappling scramble, or forces Silva into defensive positions on the ground, it could be a long night for the last undefeated Fighting Nerd. But like I said, Silva showed me a skill I did not know he possessed in his fight against Bryce Mitchell, so I'm inclined to think that he can definitely defend those types of pressures and those types of advances. This is just a classic striker versus grappler clash. Now Lopes, don't get me wrong, he's an amazing striker as well. He has had amazing knockouts as well, so I'm not saying he's like this immature striker or anything like that. And like I've said several times already, Jean Silva is pretty much a good grappler. That's why I think this fight is very, very important. So who do I think is going to win this fight? In my opinion, I think it's a 50-50 fight, honestly speaking. Both guys coming on the rise, but I give a slight edge to Jean Silva. Like I said, this man is carrying a lot of pressure on his shoulder, but I think he's going to embrace it. I think he's going to know that this fight isn't just for him, it's for the Fighting Nerds, because it's been a lot of pressure with them, man. I mean, you can look at the way they react when their teammate loses. Like, they really take this brotherhood very serious. You can tell that they're just close friends. All right, they're pretty much brothers, like I said. So I think Jean Silva, knowing that he's not just fighting for himself, he's fighting for his team, he's fighting for his brotherhood, he's fighting for something that is bigger than him, he's fighting for the reputation of the Fighting Nerds. And in my opinion, I think Jean Silva has a big chance to save the Fighting Nerds in 2025. And honestly speaking, if we're being really honest, I don't think we're seeing the last of the Fighting Nerds. Most great fighters have a loss, and that's how they come back better. At the end of the day, that's the most inspiring thing about the fight game. It's not about when you lose or how you lose, it's about how you get back up. Every single one of these fighters have room for improvement, and they're still early in their career in the UFC. So I still think they have a lot of potential. I don't think their hype has totally derailed, but I can admit that the aura has depleted a little bit. But like I said, Jean Silva can bring that back up and save this team. So there you have it. 2025 has been a rough year for the Fighting Nerds. Prates, Mauricio, Ruffy, and Borralho have all suffered setbacks, and the hype has cooled off. But Jean Silva has a chance to turn everything around. If he can beat Diego Lopes, not only does he keep his own undefeated record alive, he also carries the Fighting Nerd banner forward and proves this group of fighters still belongs in the conversation as UFC future stars. If you want a detailed explanation of every Fighting Nerd and their fighting style, go ahead and click this video up here. All right, that's a good video to watch at any time. And the main question is Jean Silva the real deal? Can he stop Diego Lopes' momentum? And which Fighting Nerd do you think has the brightest future? Let me know down in the comments. All right, drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video if you like the video, and subscribe to the channel for more fight breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.